Leaving Tewksbury is 6:05 PM on Thursday, January 19th, 2023. I'd like to call this meeting of the Tewksbury Board of Health to order. First on the agenda tonight is approval of minutes from our December 15th, 2022 meeting. I know the minutes were emailed out this morning or yesterday. So I've had a chance to review it, and I have no changes myself. Mr. Scarano,
I
have you?
have no changes and I have reviewed it.
Okay. Ms. Amato?
I've reviewed it and I have no changes.
Mr. Root?
None here.
Okay. So I'll entertain a motion to approve the meeting minutes for December 15th, 2022 as submitted.
I motion to approve the
Second.
minutes.
Okay. So Ms. Amato made the motion, and Mr. Scarano seconded. So the motion's been put forth and second to approve the minutes of December 15th, 2022 meeting as submitted. All those in favor will signify by stating aye.
Aye.
Chair votes aye as well. Motion carries unanimously 5-0. And I forgot to mention housekeeping wise, there are new microphones here. Don't worry, you don't have to have your mouth right over the microphone. They're omnidirectional, so they'll pick us up wherever we are. Okay. Moving on, new business. Draft tobacco regulations to incorporate state law. Been talking about this for a bit, and we have Ron Beauregard, our tobacco control agent, here tonight in case any member had any questions. But just as a review, the state came out with their new regulations in 2019, and this is just an exercise to bring our regulations to match the same level of requirements that the state does. And just those that are watching it later on, the state promulgates certain regulations that the local health department has to enforce, and local boards of health are able to make our own regulations. If there is something that the state has a regulation for, the town also has a regulation for. The stipulation is that the town has to match the I won't say degree of severity, but the degree of detail on the contents of the regulation locally, so that we cannot have a regulation that is weaker than the state. We can match the state for its strength, or we can make things stricter if there's a local need to have that done. So besides some updating of definitions that the state has, really the key thing in this is that the state had a much higher fee structure or penalty structure for tobacco sales violations, where Tewksbury had a $100, $200, and $300 fine based on occurrence and a 24-month look back, which meant if someone had a sales infraction in less than 24 months since the last one, that would have counted as their second infraction. The state has a 36-month look back window, and their penalty fees are $1,000, $2,000, and $3,000 per violation. And as we had a sales violation come before us last year, unfortunately that business is no longer in business, but it was their first violation, and they were assessed a fee of $1,000. And at that time, the board had decided to, because it wasn't stipulated whether the fee had to be paid up front or sort of installment period, so long as the fee was paid in full before the permit was due for renewal, which is at the end of December. They renew?
Yes.
Okay. So built into that's not anything about the installment plan if there is a fee, and hopefully there won't be any fees that we'll have to worry about in the future, but that was really the key difference, that we had to strengthen our local regulations to match the penalty structure as it pertains specifically to tobacco sales violations that the state has. So we have received in our board packets, I think in the last month or two, our tobacco regs that Ron Beauregard has edited, and part of it was sort of the template regulation that the Mass Association of Boards of Health has offered out to communities in Massachusetts. And he had sort of gone through and highlighted what were the proposed changes in it. And again, to be clear, we're not adding anything new to our regulation that is new to Tewksbury and that is not included in the state regulation that we're referencing here. So that's where we're able to sort of do this a bit more of a fast track. This is more of an administrative update of the regulation so that we eliminate any confusion between what the state has for tobacco control regulation and what we have locally, so that we're both even par now. If there was ever a case where we wanted to make something stronger than what the state has, then that would require the whole process of having public hearings and discussions about that. But in this case, there is no public hearing per se, because this is just an administrative rewrite of the regulation to match what the state has. So all I took from what Ron had submitted before is I just put this into our regular format, which essentially is just referencing by number instead of letter for each section, putting the footer at the bottom with how many pages it is, as well as Tewksbury Board of Health Regulations, Chapter 11, restricting the sale of tobacco products. So very aware if someone prints this, it's easy to not be aware that you may have missed a page. So that's why it's helpful and essential to have the page numbering on it. And the only other thing that I added to this content-wise was on the very last section under effective date. I just mentioned too, the reason we're doing this was just that this regulation has been rewritten to incorporate by reference 105 CMR 665, minimum standards for retail sale of tobacco and electronic nicotine delivery systems, and MGL Chapter 270, Section 6. So I just want to have it at least stated in the document the reason why we were doing the updates. I also looked at having on this, if we approve it tonight, then it'd be adoption date of today, and then a shall take effect in February 1st, 2023, because that still give us time to do the advertising and public notification of the updated regulation. So with that, I'll turn it over to the floor if anyone has any questions or comments.
I have a question. This might be really simple, but when it states public areas, I feel like that's broad. How can you explain to me when it says public areas of, what does that mean?
Is this in reference to no smoking?
Yes.
Yeah, public areas, is that the title of it, section? Or
Here, you
I'm
come up to the
sorry.
table, Ron, so you're on the camera.
It is. It's
This must be the, just don't recall the, prohibited in public places,
yes,
section R,
thank you.
yes. So that was, the title, but workplaces is really it's a good thing to point out actually, because a public place might make you think that it's somewhere outside or anything that's public, that the public is invited to. But the first section of, the first subsection of that one indicates that you're incorporating or adopting Chapter 70, Section 21. And Section 21 makes it clear that the state's law prohibiting smoking in public workspaces or it's actually the terms they use are workplace and workspace. And those are defined specifically as interior areas, enclosed areas is usually what they use. And then the state-generated regulations that extrapolate a bit, what does that mean? Sometimes we get recommendations to have outdoor areas that are quasi-outdoor, that might have walls, a covering, and it's quite an extensive detail in the regulations to flesh out what they meant in Chapter 270.
Right, it just seems really broad.
Yeah, I mean, they even have things, depending, the general rule is no more than, I believe, 50% of the perimeter can be enclosed by walls. but also there's different rules depending on whether or not there's a roof or whether there's not a roof. So, but yes. yeah,
Thank you
that's
very
good
much,
clarification.
I appreciate that.
So just to sort of dovetail onto that, probably from my education as well. So a business can choose to have a smoking section.
Outdoors?
Yeah.
Let me check that, because there are some local regs that prohibit that. Yeah, your regulations don't add to that, so, yeah, the answer is yes, but the chapter 270, section 21 does have some language that makes it clear that if you smoke outdoors and where you smoke outdoors causes smoke to migrate indoors into a workspace or a workplace, then smoking would be prohibited in that particular outdoor space. So, if the doors were opening back and forth, or the windows were open, or if you had a vent that was bringing in fresh air and it was drawing it in, we've had a few issues with that. Meaning things had to be changed or movement had to be made.
Okay.
And there are some local communities that prohibit it altogether. But that's a little difficult to manage, but it can be done.
Okay, good. So I guess for the benefit, so this is not restricting that people cannot smoke at all in public, but rather just have to be mindful if it's a business or a public setting that it's not going to, doing outside, it's not going to potentially infiltrate inside and have people breathing secondhand smoke.
That's correct. And as I look at your section R, you did extend a little further out for the retail tobacco stores, the vape and smoke shops. The state law allows smoking in such establishments.
Yeah.
But this was not today. This year, existing regs, when it first came out, prohibits that activity.
So Ms. Mo, are you fine with the explanation now?
I am very much,
Okay.
thank you.
You're welcome.
Any other questions for our esteemed guest tonight?
Well, I guess just going back to that very quickly. There will be some, obviously, situations that will be fact-driven for a determination on whether a violation occurs.
That's correct.
This isn't just strictly a regulation determining a violation. There is still factual scenarios involved that are going to have to be determined. And I'm sure future amendments to the regulation as they come and go, these factual determinations will be incorporated again into the Code of Mass Regulations.
That's right.
But people ought to be cognizant of the fact that, where the public has access, your smoking obviously puts you in a place where the regulation may be applicable.
That's right. And
And you should side on the side of caution.
And you actually brought to mind sometimes I forget that there are other laws that apply in regard to outdoor smoking. And there is a law, I don't have the site top of my tongue, but there is a statute that prohibits smoking in school grounds. School
Makes
grounds. So like at a football game or what have you, a track meet, whatever it might be. So that would be an example of an outdoor, but it wouldn't be, I guess that would be a public place, a public space.
Right.
But there is,
It goes under the educational.
it goes under the education statute, yeah.
Well, it used to be that you had disposal receptacles
Yeah.
that were a tip-off, that this was an area that was typically used as an area designated for smoking. You're seeing less and less of that. So there is less and less of an outside indicator of where these designated areas are. But certainly private companies are designating areas inside their buildings, even outside of their buildings with enclosures, roofs, ventilation systems, et cetera, to handle these types of things. So like I said, I think the area is evolving, and I think the technology will evolve with it. It'll become clearer and clearer where the designated areas are.
No pun intended.
And I think the final thing I'll say is that as long as I've been on the board, which is 10 plus years, the only infractions that have come to before us of violations of this regulation have been for sales violations. So, correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm not aware, being told firsthand, that there have been calls that have come in that someone's dropped the dime, that someone's smoking in a place where they shouldn't be, but rather what comes before the board is just for sales violations, and that's as a result of some type of a, what do you call it, a sting operation or sales, or compliance check, compliance check.
Sorry, stings a little.
Yeah, it stings if you get fined.
It hurts this giver of it as well, especially these days.
So in case anyone was listening or focused on the issue about where you can smoke or not smoke, we're not expecting a whole bunch of people to be coming before us because someone dropped the dime that someone was smoking where they shouldn't. This is really geared on the tobacco sales.
But we should be cognizant of the fact that we may get requests
Yep.
for clarification and interpretation of our own regulations that we just adopted on whether or not areas are applicable and whether or not the areas would be prohibited under the regulation from smoking. So I certainly expect that now that this has been or will be adopted, that we will get some input and have requested some feedback on our own regulation that we're adopting. And I guess my next question is, how much leeway do we have with interpretation? Or are we looking back strictly, since we've adopted the state regulation, are we looking back to the state for guidance before we opine?
Are you talking specifically on the smoking and,
Yes.
well, they rolled out those regulations. They are pretty, some of them have a lot of specificity in them in terms of percentage and how to measure and all that sort of thing. So they're pretty good. We don't always get that, so it was really nice to get that. But in terms of that migration, you were talking about fact specific, is smoke coming into a restaurant or to a workplace and that sort of thing? That's just based on what reasonable minds, it's just really a reasonableness test. And I always try, when people are asking about these things, my intention isn't to issue, it's been self-governed for the most part. I think just because of the, for lack of a better word, culture, just the idea of smoking places where we used to, my mom used to, I still remember my mom holding having a cigarette in her mouth while she was showing me clothes at J.M. Fields in Haverhill, a sweeping thing. So it's just so totally changed. The vaping is a little more discreet and difficult to manage, so sometimes we have some.
Now, the fines are related to the sale of tobacco.
The fines are related to specifically to 105 CMR 665, which includes the fines for the sales of tobacco. For the smoking in a public place, that still would apply the lower fine of $100.
Okay, and that's my point is that sometimes those fees are high enough where people will appeal it and look to make determinations of fact. And who is the fact finder in these types of situations? Is it going to be the local board of health?
Yes.
Well, also, don't you think what the explanation that he had given me, I thought cleared it?
Well,
I mean, you're talking about space, 50%. I mean, I felt like that was, you were in depth on, to me, it answered my question.
Yeah.
But I don't know, maybe you're looking for something more detailed and.
well, it could be something beyond that issue.
Not so much detailed on the regulation, but the factual part where someone may be determined to be outside or inside a particular area. That's a fact-driven situation, right? Even though we have good regulations and good draft and good measurements, someone may say, I'm not paying that fine. I don't agree with that. I don't agree I was in that area. who becomes the fact finder in that type of situation is my question. Is it the local board of health? So we really are thinking about setting up a public hearing situation where people come in and make their plea, so to speak, or their pitch on why they weren't violated. But we could potentially have some of these types of hearings.
Well, I think my question really is, on the sales violation, that's clear and cut because it's you or someone you've sent into the store, so
Yeah.
there's the witness to the infraction. If it's someone that's smoking what they shouldn't, I guess there is no visual proof by an enforcer of the regulation at that point when it happens, so it's more hearsay.
In the few times that I've issued a citation on this throughout the collaborative, the way it usually works is we do get from time to time, there's a hotline, the state actually has a hotline, so it gets filtered into our collaborative, so I'll have to investigate. More often than not, it's inside of a building, you know, a workplace. It sometimes is in lunchrooms, bathrooms, you know, even sometimes in a warehouse or something like that, or sometimes in receiving areas where that issue we were talking about earlier, it's outside, but it's all coming in because the doors are open and such. And people complain, you know, rightfully so, if that's true. Sometimes there are cases where, you know, the argument could be made that it's vindictive or this sort of thing, you know, there's another driver. But in the end, it has to be determination of whether or not it's a breaking of the law. And so what's good is anytime there's been a fine, and when I said the board is a fact finder, it's not for every, it would be only if someone were to appeal a citation that would be given, in my case, in my judgment, whether or not the facts lined up. Now, and always with appeal, you can make a distinction. What I do is I try my very best to, again, I don't want to belabor this, but if they say, look, Ron, you know, if you come at X time, and that's what I try to do is get clarification of when the issues are. I mean, candles are lit sometimes. I can still smell it. Thankfully, I have a sense of smell, even with the mask. But ashtrays in the you know, in the lunchroom. Well, why would that be there? Well, you know, someone can argue, well, I was outside. I put it out, or I put it there. And you know, you can. It is a judgment call. Most of the time, when a warning is given for the first time, and I just try to work with the employer. And the other key thing that always remember is that it's usually the person that's cited is not the person doing the actual smoking, but the owner, the establishment, and that we kind of just, they don't want, most of the time they don't want it either. There's a few times where it's a small company and they kind of have a little leeway and such. And as you mentioned about, you know, it's not something I'm going into businesses, you know, on a daily basis to check things. It's complaint driven, so.
I did have a quick question, hopefully it's a quick question.
Yeah.
So when I was reading, I might have skipped it, but I didn't see anything as far as like, so public, like storefronts and things like that. Is there a certain distance that people should be aware of smoking before coming towards that storefront? Due to, you know?
Yeah.
Okay, is there a distance did I miss it?
No, I don't think you missed it. I don't think you have a distance.
Okay.
Now, some of the things I've seen in some of the local regs, some local regs are specific to municipal buildings and such, libraries and town hall, et cetera.
I know like schools, there's a certain distance,
Yeah.
but I wasn't sure as far as like storefronts or restaurants, if there is a certain distance from the main entrance that people should not be smoking.
Yeah, I'm pretty certain, I could review it again, but 270 section 21, I don't believe has such provisions.
And I think you have to look at, just if I could interject for a moment, you have to look at the nature of the property. Some property is truly private.
Right.
Okay, some property is truly public. And then you have these other hybrid areas, right? So on a private property, I don't think the state is looking to intervene in that area or in that purview.
You mean outside?
Yeah.
Outside.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean,
I don't think
I know
even in like a storefront, people really don't.
And then this, yeah, boy, of all the things to pick, I mean, this one is a little, no, this one is, we even get into what the definition of smoking is, and it's not moving about.
Yeah.
If you're leaving or coming towards, sort of putting something away, you can't, so we really, it's a kind of a little bizarre, I use the word sting, but, we have some places that prohibit it in outdoor areas, and, Ron Beauregard has to go at 10 at night, in a club, and, see if a waiter or waitress or somebody in charge can see the person they know or should know and that sort of stuff, so. And then we give a warning, usually it gets resolved.
Thank you.
Oh, you're welcome.
Okay, any other questions for our esteemed guest? Okay. So what's the pleasure of the board? Do people like to vote to, I guess, amend this regulation tonight? Or,
It's just a two-part motion, one to amend and the second to adopt? Or is this something we can incorporate in one fell swoop?
that's I'm glad we have a lawyer as a board member,
I would feel better,
procedurally.
I would feel better just procedurally voting to amend it, getting the board's vote, and then voting to adopt it and incorporate by reference state statute.
Okay,
I'll make the motion to amend it.
I'll second.
okay, motion's been put forth and second to amend chapter 11, restricting the sale of tobacco products regulation. All those in favor signify by stating aye.
Aye.
Chair votes aye as well, motion carries unanimously. Okay, and the second motion.
I'll make the motion to vote to adopt the amendment. Am I right?
I'll second the motion to adopt the amendment.
Was that the motion we're gonna do, or was it to incorporate?
I think the only thing that needs to be changed is to adopt the motion as edited in section,
Okay,
Okay.
and I don't think you guys had to edit it.
no, it was an edit that I had Bob,
And that's the reason I think we're going through the second exercise.
By reference, okay.
Correct.
So, vote to adopt
Section
section 11.24
as amended.
as amended.
okay.
I vote to adopt section
11.24.
11.24 as amended.
If that's a motion, I'm going to second it.
Okay, so the motion's been put forth and second to amend the regulation, or amend section 11.24 by adding the word by reference. All those in favor signify by stating aye.
Aye.
Chair votes aye as well, motion carries unanimously, 5-0. So technically, since we will have to do a typo in this, we'll have to all sign this
Mhm.
afterwards, not tonight. Okay.
Thank you. Thank you
So
very much.
thank you very
Thanks,
much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
To clarify things, and we can send it to the retailers once they're in effect.
Sure.
All right.
And I'd just be curious if when you do talk with Cheryl, this what she says about
Yeah,
the
I
idea
have.
of adopting and then adding on to it.
Yeah, it'll just be longer, but I mean, it's long as it is,
Well, it'd be a shorter regulation because we didn't restate the state reg that went into, we just said we adopted as local and then we added on our pieces that were above and beyond what the state had.
Otherwise, oh, is that what you're saying? Oh, that's what you're saying. Well, I think to see it, you'd have to I'm trying to think, you'd still have to incorporate some of it, like the violation section and that division. Okay, kind of like you did with the chapter 270, section 21, to incorporate, to say we hereby, yeah. I think I don't know the answer to that. I don't think it's necessary either way, because I think chapter 270, section 21 actually already gave boards of health the authority to enforce, but I might be wrong. All right,
Okay,
very good. It was very nice to see everyone.
well, thank you. Thank you for coming tonight. Nothing under old business discussion, so director reports.
Ariel, our regional inspector, got certified as a site safe instructor. So she'll be starting trainings her first months February 27th and 28th at the Tingsboro Town Hall. There's no additional details yet about the timing, but those dates are locked in. And that's really all I have.
Okay, I had one quick thing and then Sprague has a quick thing. She and I were chatting before the meeting tonight. I've been talking about trying to come up with a health education topic that we could do potentially one per meeting. And I just want to put out a list and just think about it. And then if there's anything else you think we should add to it, we'll just bring it up at our meeting next time. But I'd like to try to get these planned out. One was under mental illness, behavioral health. So one option we could look at is having someone from the police department come and speak to us about their frontline initiative. Another would be nutrition and obesity prevention. Wellness, which is a all-encompassing topic, but sort of wellness and prevention. Thinking more to the effects of COVID could have been mitigated a bit up front if people were practicing more generally better wellness and prevention methodologies. Substance abuse, which we always cover in October. Increasing health literacy / healthcare advocacy and navigating healthcare system. This comes from a recent survey of health initiatives or concerns in our local communities. And there was a concern of just the aging population and that a lot of us that are sitting behind this table have parents that are elderly that now we're having to help them navigate the healthcare system and be healthcare advocates for them. So trying to take a page where we're trying to have Tewksbury Cares doing that is be able to identify resources out there and help people connect the dots to those resources. Emergency preparedness, which we something to look at doing in September, and then heart healthy living. So those are just some of the things. I know I talked to you, Director Gillis, about seeing if anyone can come in maybe next month to talk to us about from the Hoying Initiative. Again, it's not necessarily a public health, but it involves mental health aspect and then sort of an awareness of resources out there, because as folks of our generation are having to help our parents, at times that's when you're coming into hoarding situations. So it's good for folks of our generation to realize what hoarding is about. It's not just kids having messy rooms, and what are some of the resources out there that people can reach out to and utilize. So I welcome any other ideas. Tonight, if you have any, fine, but if not, just save and bring them to our next meeting. So I'd like to try to get this on a calendar basis.
I will say on that note that the Senior Center has initiated a program where they're working with seniors on devices, their phones, their iPads, so that they can be better at researching the types of issues that you're talking about. So it isn't just the fact that, we're looking as children to help parents. There are other agencies and boards that are assisting elderly and those moving in that direction to being able to operate their devices, computers, hand devices, etc., and be able to assist themselves more and be proficient in that. So any of these things that we're talking about that can be moved over and suggested to the Senior Center and the board over there might be welcome.
Yeah. No, thank you for sharing. That's great that they're getting that education availability. Okay, and then for next month, we have, in addition to the hoarding task force, you've also come up with the
Yes,
speaker.
there's gonna be a speaker from Mass for Safe Technology. She'll be speaking about wireless education, understanding EMFs, and radiation. So, that'll be next meeting.
If I can just add on to that, because I think part of the focus of this too now is that as cellular companies are promoting the 5G networks, that's where this is sort of coming from, because if you're getting increased bandwidth out there through the air, it means there is higher strength signals propagating, and whatever concerns there might have been from lower strength wireless signals
Right.
will now be amplified by having stronger signals. So sort of an awareness and education for us.
Yeah, educating on how to look at, she'll go over pretty much educating on what to look for, what the number should be, how to look at it in your own home, and everything else. So it should be very educational for sure.
And then directly goes, you had shared with us that the town manager had indicated that about several years ago, the Board of Selectmen adopted some type of a cellular regulation or policy using the Burlington regulation as a template. So we're gonna try to find that as well. And just,
Yeah.
and I guess you're gonna find it at the town side and see if they can get that on the website if it's not there.
There's not a limitation on placement of, as you are aware, this 5G is coming down to, rather than large areas, very small areas. So for instance, in front of your house, there could be a pole.
Correct.
On that pole could be a 5G device
Right.
that's making it possible for you to gain speed and bandwidth
Yeah.
necessary. This is where the concerns are raising. Because you can imagine, as they do with cell towers, they'll want to put them on every pole.
Yeah.
And if that's the regulation you're talking about, I'm sure there'd be a tremendous amount of interest on looking at a mapping situation on how that's regulated. I don't know if the Burlington regulation incorporates that, but certainly that has been a concern in other communities
Yes.
where they're just inundating.
It's been going around, from my understanding, a lot of the communities and towns and cities surrounding us are upping they're changing their regulations in their places because of the amount of 5G, especially in front of schools and homes. So personal homes and schools were a big trigger for people, I think. So it could be concerning depending on where they're located.
So whatever regulation the town has, I believe it was from 2019, before 5G came out. So,
Yeah.
we'll have to dig it out and just see.
And you can understand that, you're at home, you're getting, let's say, effect at your home, and then you go to school, and you can't get away from it. It's in front of the school as well. So you're at home for 18 hours, you're in school for the other balance, and you're not able to escape the effect. I think that's really where these other communities were focusing.
Yes,
So thank you for bringing that to our attention
you're welcome.
and for arranging for the speaker to come.
Absolutely.
So anyone else have anything you'd like to bring up tonight?
I do. So January 30th, that's a Monday at 6 p.m. Tewksbury Cares is having their next meeting at the Tewksbury Police Department in the training room. We're asking for any support, anybody that is interested. If you know anyone, please, if you're unable to go, but you know someone that might be interested in helping. Again, we are trying to get this up and running. So that we can be out in the community and start educating and helping and getting those resources out. So again, that's January 30th at 6 p.m. at the Tewksbury Police Department. And then in March will be the next Wellness Committee at 3:30, but that's in March, so that's it.
Well, I'm glad to hear that they'll be meeting it. I'll try to attend that one myself.
And if anybody knows of anyone and they want to send me a message or an email, you can email me at, give me a second.
It's Braga
Yeah.
at tewksbury-ma.com.
Thank you. I use it often.
Yes. So I will be meeting there.
Thank you.
Well, Mr. Rue?
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to make a motion that we close tonight's meeting.
I'll second that motion.
Okay, motion's been put forth and second to adjourn tonight's meeting. All those in favor signify by stating aye.
Aye.
The chair votes aye as well. It is 6:44 PM. Good night, Tewksbury.
Good night.
God bless.
Nice.